Hey guys, tonight we are going to step into the pointed slippers of a man who was paid to be professionally stupid, at a time when one wrong word could make you professionally dead. Imagine you are standing in a hall of glittering gold and cool stone, the air thick with the scents of beeswax, expensive perfume, and just a hint of political desperation. The silks of the nobility rustle around you, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement, and their whispers are just as brittle. You, however, are dressed in a rainbow of mismatched colours, and everyone is pretending not to watch you, which is, of course, how you know they all are. You have one of the safest and most dangerous jobs in the entire 16th century French court, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a nice, quiet way to support the channel. And as always, feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world everyone is settling in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stone beneath your soft-soled shoes is cool, a faint, pleasant chill that seeps up into your bones. It's a feeling you've grown accustomed to here in the palace. Everything about this place is a study in contrasts. The stone is cold, but the tapestries that cover every wall are warm, woven with heroic scenes of hunts and forgotten battles, their threads saturated with the colours of jewels. The hall is vast and draughty, making torches sputter and dance, yet the body heat from the crush of courtiers makes the air close and heavy. It is a beautiful, magnificent, suffocating place. It's home. Your name is Nicolas Ferial, though almost no one uses it. To the court, and more importantly to the king, you are Triboulet, and your world is a gilded cage, exquisitely crafted and endlessly entertaining, but a cage nonetheless. Your uniform, this ridiculous, wonderful uniform, is your key, and your lock. The motley suit of clashing yellows and greens, the floppy cap adorned with tiny tinkling bells, the sceptre you carry, which is just a carved wooden stick with a miniature jester head on top. It's a costume that announces your strangeness. It sets you apart. In a place where everyone is clawing for status, you are gloriously and safely without any. You are the fool. And being the fool is a serious business. You lean against a pillar, half hidden in shadow, watching the preening and posturing. A duchess whose powdered face is cracking into a web of fine lines, laughs a little too loudly at a baron's dull story. You know for a fact she's mortgaged her summer estate to afford the pearls around her neck. You see a young count, his eyes sharp and ambitious, trying to catch the king's attention. His fine leather doublet is probably worth more than your entire village put together. Everyone here is performing, playing a role. Your role is simply more honest. They hide their foolishness behind velvet and titles. You wear yours on the outside for all to see. It's a funny sort of inversion when you think about it, which of course is your job. The man at the centre of this universe, your boss, is King Francis I. And there he is, holding court near the great hearth. Francis is a difficult man to miss. He is tall for the age, nearly 6 feet, with an air of restless energy about him. His most famous feature, the one you privately find endlessly amusing, is his long, prominent nose. It commands his face, a majestic peninsula of cartilage that gives him an expression of perpetual, slightly quizzical authority. You've heard the common folk call him le roi grand-nez, the big-nosed king, but never, ever to his face. He is a walking contradiction, this king of yours. He is a warrior who has known the sting of defeat and the humiliation of being captured in battle. Yet he is also a great patron of the arts, a true Renaissance man. This is a king, after all, who managed to convince the great Leonardo da Vinci to leave Italy and spend his final years here in France. You've even seen the old man shuffling around the nearby Château du Clos-Lucé, his beard as white as snow, his eyes still holding a spark of genius, as he sketches out his bizarre inventions. The king gave him a title, first painter, engineer and architect to the king. Francis collects artists the way other men collect hunting dogs. His court is a haven for poets, painters and thinkers. He surrounds himself with beauty and intellect, and he expects the world to applaud his impeccable taste. This appreciation for brilliance is, in a way, what protects you, but it's a double-edged sword. He appreciates brilliance, but he cannot, under any circumstances, abide being made to look like a fool himself. His temper is as legendary as his nose. He can shift from jovial laughter to a chilling, stony silence in the space of a single heartbeat. You've seen it happen. The air grows cold, the smiles freeze on people's faces, and a single word from him can ruin a man's life. Your life's work is to dance along the very edge of that temper, to tickle the sleeping dragon, but never, ever wake it. And this brings you to your unique position, your fool's license. This is the unwritten law that governs your existence. Your motley and your marotte, that silly jester stick, are your shield. They grant you the privilege of speaking truth to power. While nobles whisper their criticisms in secret, you can shout them in the open. You can mock a general's paunch, or compose a crude little song about a bishop's wandering eye. You are the court's pressure valve, releasing the tension of its rigid etiquette with bursts of chaos and wit. It's a heady kind of power, but the lines are invisible and they shift with the king's mood. You can mock a man's vanity, but not his lineage. You can jest about the quality of the wine, but not the king's latest treaty. Historians still argue whether the court jester was a mere entertainer or a genuine political advisor, whispering truths into the king's ear under the guise of comedy. From where you're standing, leaning against this cold pillar, you feel it's a bit of both, and neither. You aren't crafting policy, but you know the king listens. Sometimes, after you make a particularly pointed joke about the price of salt, you see him later in quiet conversation with his treasurer. He would never admit you influenced him. Your observations must always be cloaked in foolishness, your advice wrapped in a riddle. It is a game of plausible deniability. If the joke lands well, the court laughs, and a point is made. If it lands poorly, you're just a fool who doesn't know any better. At least that's the hope. You shift your weight. The little bells on your hat jingle softly, a sound that makes a nearby lady-in-waiting flinch and move away, as if your silliness were contagious. And maybe it is. You are the welcome infection in this sterile environment, the chaos in the order. You are the only person who can look the king in the eye and tell him his new hat is ridiculous. It's the best job in the world. And tonight, as you watch your king, you feel a familiar, unsettling thought bubble up. You just hope it isn't the last job you ever have. You push yourself away from the cool stone of the pillar. The evening is progressing, moving from the stiff formalities of the reception to the more relaxed, if equally treacherous atmosphere of the banquet. Servants in royal livery move with practiced haste, weaving through the throng with heavy silver platters. The air now carries the rich, greasy scent of roasted meats. A whole swan, its feathers painstakingly reattached, glides past, looking alarmingly lifelike for a dead bird, a personal favourite of the king, and a dish that always struck you as a bit tragic, and more than a little difficult to carve. The king and his most favoured guests are seated at a long, raised table at one end of the hall. Below them, a chaotic jumble of lesser nobles and officials dine at smaller tables. You wander through the aisles, your bells a soft, familiar herald of your approach. People make way for you. A fool has no place at the table, but he has the run of the entire hall. It's another of the strange perks of the job. You snatch a sugared almond from a dish as you pass, popping it into your mouth. The sugar is a delightful, gritty explosion on your tongue. Sugar is still a fantastic luxury, a spice more than a sweetener, and you know the king's cooks use it with abandon to show off his wealth. You watch the dynamics of the room. The constant, subtle dance of power is everywhere. A courtier laughs heartily at one of the king's jokes, a joke you yourself told him last week, but no one needs to know that. A lady dabs her lips with a fine linen napkin, her eyes darting towards a handsome duke who is pretending not to notice her. Under the tables, a few well-fed hunting hounds gnaw on discarded bones tossed down by the diners. It's a common practice, a sort of medieval recycling program that keeps the floor, well, relatively clear of gristle anyway. Tonight, the king seems to be in a particularly good mood. He has been laughing freely, his great shoulders shaking. He just secured a favourable new trade agreement, or so the rumour goes, and his natural charisma is on full display. This is your time to shine. A happy king is a generous king, and a king more willing to laugh at a joke that might otherwise land a bit too close to home. You feel the familiar hum of performance building in you, the playful energy that makes you so good at what you do. You spot your target. Not the king, never the king directly. At least, not yet. Your target is a portly, pompous marquis who always carries himself with an air of profound self-satisfaction. He has a new, absurdly feathered hat, and he has been turning his head this way and that all evening, ensuring everyone gets a good look at it. He is, to put it plainly, a walking invitation to be mocked. You have a dozen witty insults on the tip of your tongue, each one crafted to deflate his ego just enough to make the room laugh, but not so much as to create a genuine enemy. It is a delicate art. You saunter over, your walk a silly, loping gait that is part of the act. The Marquis sees you coming and puffs out his chest, a smirk on his face. He expects a verbal spar. He thinks he's ready. He doesn't mind being the butt of a royal jester's joke. It means he's important enough to be noticed. The nobles near him quiet down, eager for the show. And this is where the evening takes a turn. Maybe it's the wine you managed to sneak from a passing servant. Maybe it's the easy, infectious laughter of the king that has made you feel invincible. Maybe you're just bored of the same old verbal jousting. Tonight, you decide, you want to do something different, something memorable. You walk right past the Marquise's smiling face. You don't say a word. The crowd is momentarily confused. Your silence is unexpected. Then, just as you are behind him, you act. In a single fluid motion born of a spectacularly bad idea, you swing your arm and deliver a firm, resounding slap. Not to his face, of course. You aren't a complete lunatic, but to his rather large and well-padded posterior. The sound is magnificent, a sharp, percussive thwack that cuts through the gentle hum of conversation and the distant strumming of a lute. It's not a violent sound, not truly, but it is a shockingly intimate one, a deeply undignified sound. It's the kind of noise a farmer might make swatting a stubborn mule, and for a brief, fleeting half-second it works. A few nervous giggles bubble up from the nearest table. Then the silence hits. It doesn't fall. It slams down. It's a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothers every other sound in the hall. The lute player's fingers freeze over his strings. A servant, mid-pour, holds a pitcher of wine motionless, a thin red stream splashing silently onto the tablecloth. The scraping of a knife on a plate stops. The dogs under the table stop chewing. Every single head in that vast, cavernous hall turns, as if pulled by a single string. First, they look at the Marquis, whose face has gone from smug amusement to a mask of pure, purple-hued rage. His mouth is open, but no sound is coming out. Then, every eye in the room, hundreds of them, all land on you. You stand there, your hands still tingling slightly. The little bells on your hat are utterly silent. Your usual shield of foolishness feels terrifyingly thin. Physicality was the problem. While courtiers' words were daggers, their bodies were sacrosanct, protected by an ever more complex code of conduct. Scholars now debate how strictly these codes of Renaissance etiquette were enforced day to day, but you've just discovered a very, very hard line. You've broken the unspoken rule. You didn't just mock the man's dignity, you assaulted it with your hand. You treated a Marquis of the realm like a stable boy. The seconds stretch into an eternity. You can feel the sweat trickling down your back. Your colourful costume suddenly feels like a shroud. And then, the final dreadful moment. The collective gaze of the court shifts again, moving from you to the high table. They look to the one person whose reaction is the only one that matters. You force yourself to look too. You see King Francis. He has slowly, deliberately placed his silver goblet back on the table. There is no clatter, just a soft, final thud. The smile he wore moments ago is gone. It hasn't been replaced by anger, not yet. It's been replaced by a chilling emptiness. His face is a blank slate. He looks at the stunned Marquis, then his eyes, dark and suddenly unreadable, slide over to you. They lock onto yours. There is no humour in them, no forgiveness. There's only a terrifying, absolute calm. The calm of a summer sky just before the lightning strikes. And you realise, with a lurch in your stomach that has nothing to do with sugared almonds, that you haven't just taken a joke too far. You've slapped the king himself by proxy. And the sound you hear now, the roaring in your ears, is the sound of your entire world about to end. The silence in the hall continues to press in on you. It's so absolute you feel you could cut it with a knife. Every tapestry, every torch, every jewel on every noble seems to be holding its breath. Your own breath is a tight knot in your chest. The king's eyes are still fixed on you, and in their depths you see the good humour of the evening finally curdle into something cold and hard. Slowly, deliberately, he rises from his seat. The scrape of his chair on the stone floor is obscenely loud, an unnatural sound in the profound quiet. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His voice, when it comes, is soft, almost conversational, yet it carries to every corner of the room, laced with an authority that is as undeniable as it is terrifying. Triboulet, he says. Your name, your fool's name, sounds like a curse on his lips. 2 royal guards, Men whose gleaming cuirasses you've polished with your wit 100 times before detach themselves from the wall. Their faces are impassive, but you know them. You've shared a flask with one of them on a cold night. You've made the other's children laugh with puppets made from your gloves. Tonight, they look right through you. They take up positions on either side of you, their gauntleted hands resting on the pommels of their swords. They don't touch you. They just stand there. Their presence is enough. The king turns his attention to the sputtering, incandescent marquis. With a simple, dismissive wave of his hand, he signals for the man to be silent and seated. The marquis, whose face is still a shade of insulted plum, obeys instantly, collapsing back into his chair as if his strings have been cut. The king is not interested in his honor. He is interested in his own. You didn't just slap a courtier. You violated the sanctity of the king's court. You imposed your own chaotic will in his domain. Anarchy, even on a small scale, is the one thing a monarch cannot tolerate. The king's eyes return to you. He gestures for you to be brought forward. The guards nudge you, and you begin the longest walk of your life. It's maybe 50 feet to the raised dais, but it feels like 50 miles. Your soft slippers make no sound. The only noise is the gentle, mocking jingle of your own bells as you move. Each tiny chime sounds like a nail being hammered into your coffin. You keep your eyes on the floor, on the patterns of the polished stone. You can feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on your back, a physical weight of morbid fascination. When you reach the foot of the high table, the guards stop you. You finally raise your head to look at the king. The blankness is gone from his face now. It's been replaced by a focused, icy rage. He looks down at you from his superior height on the dais, his expression a mixture of profound disappointment and absolute fury. "You have amused us for many years, little fool," the king says, his voice still deceptively calm. "You have made us laugh. You have even, on occasion, made us think. You have enjoyed a unique protection in this court, a license to speak what others would not dare to whisper." He pauses, letting the words hang in the air. "That license is hereby revoked." A collective, barely audible gasp ripples through the onlookers. This is it. The end of the game. To lay hands on a peer of the realm, in our presence, under our roof, is an affront of the highest order, the king continues, his voice gaining a hard, sharp edge. It is an insult not just to the man, but to the dignity of the crown itself. It is a betrayal of the trust we placed in you, and it will not go unpunished. You want to say something, you want to make a joke, to beg, to explain that it was just a moment of profound stupidity, but your tongue is a dry lump of leather in your mouth. You know that words are useless now. You have crossed a line from which there is no witty retreat. "For this transgression," the king proclaims, his voice finally rising to fill the hall, "I sentence you to death." The words hit you like a physical blow. Death, not a fine, not a flogging, not even exile. Death. The sentence is so disproportionate, so final, it bypasses any semblance of a trial or legal process. This isn't law. It is raw, absolute power. This is the king's wrath made manifest. It serves as a stark reminder to everyone present, from the loftiest duke to the lowliest page, that their lives are entirely in his hands. This is, of course, a well-established fact of medieval and Renaissance monarchies. The king's justice was often swift and personal, especially when his authority was challenged directly. A morbid silence follows the pronouncement. You feel a strange sense of detachment, as if this is happening to someone else, You watch as a lady at a nearby table discreetly faints into the arms of her companion. You notice the Marquis, your victim, now looks pale and horrified. He wanted an apology, perhaps, vindication. He almost certainly did not want your head. Then the king does something strange. Perhaps a flicker of old affection for you surfaces. Perhaps it is a bout of twisted royal caprice. Or perhaps he simply wants to prolong the theatre of it all. He leans forward, resting his hands on the table. However, he says, a strange, cruel glint in his eye, in consideration of your many years of service, and the laughter you have brought us, I will grant you one final piece of royal favour. The entire court leans in, straining to hear. I will permit you, the king declares, to choose the manner of your own death. The air crackles with the bizarre generosity of the offer. You are to be executed, but you get to fill in the how. It's a terrifying, almost surreal choice. Poison, hanging, the headsman's axe. It's a macabre privilege, a choice that is no choice at all. It is the king's final joke, and the punchline is your demise. You stand there, a condemned man in a clown suit. Your mind, which has always been your sharpest weapon, is now your only hope of survival. The king has given you a choice. He has laid a trap, a final test of the wit he once so admired. The guards at your side are silent sentinels. The court is a gallery of pale, hungry faces. The king is waiting, an impatient god demanding a satisfactory sacrifice. You must think. You must craft a response not for laughter, but for your life. The question is a riddle, a deadly one, and as the weight of it settles upon you, a tiny, desperate spark of an idea begins to flicker in the terrified darkness of your mind. The world has shrunk to the space between you and the king. The hundreds of watching eyes, the smell of roasted swan, the sputtering torchlight, it all fades into a blurry, indistinct periphery. All that exists is the king's expectant, stony face and the impossible question hanging in the air. Choose the manner of your own death. It's a challenge dressed as mercy. He wants you to grovel. He wants you to weep and beg for a painless end. Or perhaps he expects some final ghoulish jest, a request to be tickled to death or to drown in a barrel of wine. Any of these responses would seal your fate, providing the court with a grim, memorable final act. Your mind is racing. Your heart hammers against your ribs like a trapped bird. But on the outside, a strange calm begins to settle over you. It's the calm that comes when all other options have been stripped away. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford. Your entire career has been about reading the room, understanding your audience, and delivering the perfect line at the perfect moment. This is just the ultimate performance. The stakes have never been higher, but the craft is the same. You can feel the court's morbid curiosity pressing in. Their whispers have started up again, a low, sibilant rustle. What will he say? Will he choose the axe? It's quicker. I heard poison is agonizing. They are spectators at a theatre of cruelty, and you are the star of the show. Their fascination is a palpable force. They are witnessing a direct confrontation between the Jester and the king, the two poles of the court's power structure, the symbolic and the absolute. The scene is electric with this tension. You slowly lower your gaze as if in deep, solemn thought. You let the silence stretch. Let them wait. Let the king wait. In a room governed by his timing, this small act of making him wait is a tiny, defiant rebellion. You clasp your hands in front of you, the very picture of humble contemplation. You can feel the king's impatience growing. He is not a man who likes to be kept waiting. You remember stories of other kings and their strange whims. There's a quirky, though likely apocryphal tale of a condemned cook who was once offered a similar choice by his lord. The cook, thinking himself clever, asked to be executed by a method the lord had never used before. The lord, a man of inventive cruelty, promptly had him boiled in oil for the first time. The lesson is clear. Trying to outsmart power with simple trickery can backfire spectacularly. Your answer cannot be just a clever riddle. It must be a philosophical checkmate. It has to be an answer the king cannot grant, but also cannot refuse without looking foolish or unjust himself. You raise your head. You make eye contact with King Francis. The hubbub of the court dies down once more as they see you are about to speak. Your voice, when it comes out, is not the high-pitched squeak of your jester persona. It is your own voice, calm, measured, and devoid of any tremble. Your Majesty, you begin, your tone respectful but firm. I have considered your generous and merciful offer. I have lived my life at your court, and it seems only right that I should die here as well, according to your will. You pause, letting the humility of your words sink in. You must first appear to accept his power completely before you can subtly subvert it. You have granted me the great privilege of choosing the instrument of my departure from this world, you continue. I have thought long and hard about what I have done to offend the crown, and what manner of death would befit such a crime. The king nods slightly, his expression unreadable. He believes you are playing his game, and then you deliver the punchline. Therefore, your Majesty, you say, your voice clear and ringing in the silent hall, I have made my choice. You take a deep breath. I choose to die of old age. The words drop into the silence like stones into a perfectly still pond. For a moment, there is nothing, just a vast, collective cognitive dissonance. The court processes what you've said. I choose to die of old age. It's a perfect response. It is witty, unexpected, and utterly brilliant. It is a request that is impossible for the king to grant. He cannot wave a wand and make you die of old age on the spot. But it is also impossible for him to deny without appearing absurd. How can he refuse your chosen method? Can he execute you for wanting to die of old age? It's a verbal and logical masterstroke. You haven't insulted him. You haven't begged. You have, in essence, used his own ridiculous proposition against him. You've accepted his premise that you get to choose, and followed it to its logical, and for him, entirely unworkable, conclusion. You've laid a trap of reason and wit, and the king has walked right into it. Historians still argue about the precise wording you used, whether it was of old age, or from natural causes, or even, as one version claims, in my bed of sickness surrounded by my grandchildren. But the spirit of the gambit remains the same across all tellings. You weaponized wit to dismantle a death sentence. A nervous cough breaks the silence. Then another. Then, from the back of the room, someone snorts, a sound quickly stifled. You see the corner of the angry Marquise's mouth twitch upwards. A smile, the first crack in the icy facade of the court. You keep your eyes locked on the king. This is the moment of truth. You watch as a storm of emotions plays across his face. First, confusion, then dawning comprehension. This is followed by a flash of pure, unadulterated fury that you have outmaneuvered him. He is cornered. If he executes you now, he looks like a tyrant who cannot take a joke. The ultimate irony, given your profession, he will have been publicly beaten, his merciful offer thrown back in his face as the folly it was. The entire court has seen it. They will talk about it for years. Then something miraculous happens. The anger in the king's eyes fades, replaced by something else. A flicker of reluctant admiration. He is, after all, a man who appreciates brilliance, whether it comes from the paintbrush of Da Vinci or the mouth of his fool. He has been bested, utterly and completely, by the very wit he was about to extinguish forever. And then King Francis I, le roi grand-né, the mighty Renaissance monarch, throws his head back, and he laughs. It is not the jovial laugh from earlier in the evening. It is a deep, booming, incredulous laugh. A laugh that acknowledges defeat. A laugh that says, "You magnificent fool. You actually did it." The sound echoes through the hall, and with it the terrifying tension that has held everyone captive finally, blessedly breaks. The king's laughter cascades through the hall, a powerful rolling wave that gives everyone else permission to finally react. A moment ago, you were a dead man. Now the room is filled with the sound of nervous, relieved chuckles. The nobles who, moments before, were eyeing you like a side of beef, are now shaking their heads in disbelief, murmuring to one another. You haven't just saved your own life. You've given them the best story they'll have to tell for a decade. The Marquis, who was the source of all this trouble, actually raises his wine goblet in a small, grudging toast to you. The immediate danger has passed. But you know you are not entirely safe yet. The king's laughter is a release, not a pardon. You stand quietly, your hands still clasped, allowing him his moment. The joke was your play, but the next move is his. You've won the battle of wits, but he still commands the army. You've created a logical paradox, and now he must find a way to resolve it without losing face. Finally, the king's laughter subsides into a few chuckles. He wipes a tear of mirth from the corner of his eye with his knuckle. He looks down at you from the dais, and the anger is gone, replaced by a weary, begrudging respect. The relationship between the two of you is forever changed. You are no longer just the fool who makes him laugh. You are the fool who stared him down and won. That is not a dynamic a king can tolerate in his inner circle. Triboulet, he says, his voice now calm and decisive. You have always been a clever man. Far too clever for your own good, it seems. He lets that hang in the air for a moment. I cannot grant your request. To allow you to die of old age would take far too long, and my patience, as you have so foolishly tested, is not infinite. He glances around the room, making it clear this is a lesson for all. Nor can I execute a man for wishing for a long life. It would be unseemly. You see the solution dawning on his face. He has found his way out of the corner you backed him into. It is an elegant, if personally inconvenient solution for you. Your sentence of death is commuted, he declares. The collective sigh of relief from the assembled court is a gentle breeze across the room. You allow yourself a small, internal sigh of your own. However, he continues, and you brace yourself for the caveat. Your wit has made it impossible for you to remain at this court. I cannot have a fool who is sharper than my own counsellors. And I certainly cannot have a man in my presence who has so publicly bested his own king. His voice is firm without a hint of jest. Your presence here is no longer a comfort. It is an irritant. He points a finger toward the great doors at the far end of the hall. Therefore, you are banished. From this palace, from this city, and from the realm of France, you will leave immediately. If If you are ever seen within the borders of my kingdom again, your original sentence will be carried out without hesitation and without any choice on your part. Do you understand? It is a bittersweet victory. Your life is spared, but your life's work is over. You are exiled. You nod your head, a single sharp dip of your chin. I understand, Your Majesty. There is nothing else to say. No final joke, no witty retort. You have spent all of your wit and you have bought your life with it. It feels like a fair trade. The two guards who had flanked you now step back, their duty done. They will not escort you to a dungeon, but simply to the door. The king sits back down, picks up his goblet and takes a long drink, his eyes telling everyone that the show is over and the matter is closed. The orchestra, taking the cue, tentatively begins to play a soft melody. The conversation in the hall slowly resumes, though it is now entirely focused on what just transpired. You turn and begin your walk, a reverse of the journey you made what feels like a lifetime ago. But this time, you are not walking toward the king, but away from him, and from everything you have ever known. The faces you pass are no longer fearful or morbidly curious. They are filled with awe and perhaps a little pity. You are a legend in the making, but you are also unemployed and homeless. Such is the price of a perfect punchline. You spend your last few moments within the palace walls in a blur. You are given a simple woolen cloak to throw over your colourful motley, a small purse of coins, a final unacknowledged severance from the king, and you are unceremoniously led to a side gate. The gate groans open, and you step out into the cool, dark night. The scent of wood smoke and the river hangs in the air. The gate closes behind you with a dull, final thud. You are alone. The sound of the royal banquet, the music and the laughter is now just a faint, muffled murmur through the thick stone walls. Your final years are spent quietly, far from the intrigues and perils of the court. Some say you retired to Italy, the birthplace of the Renaissance that so captivated your former king. Others claim you simply found a quiet town in the neighbouring Duchy of Lorraine, living out your days in comfortable anonymity. You fade from the official historical record, your story passing into the realm of folklore. This quiet final chapter is perhaps the greatest irony. A man who lived his life in a cacophony of bells, laughter and public spectacle finds his final peace in silence and obscurity. And what of your joke? It outlives you. It outlives the Marquis. It even outlives King Francis I. It becomes a timeless fable told and retold in courts and taverns across Europe. It evolves into a lesson not just about the wit of a fool, but about the very nature of power. It's a reminder that true cleverness isn't about being the loudest or the strongest, but about understanding the rules of the game so well that you can change them with a single, perfectly chosen phrase. Your story becomes a quiet testament that wit, when wielded correctly, can be a shield against the sword, and that sometimes the most powerful man in the room isn't the one sitting on the throne. As you settle into your new, quiet life, you sometimes wonder if the king ever thinks of you. You imagine him, years from now, sitting by a fire, old and grey himself, telling the story of his clever, troublesome fool. And you hope that, when he reaches the punchline, a small, genuine smile still touches his lips. Medicine in the Roman Empire. Settle in now and let the noise of your world begin to fade. Just for a little while, allow your mind to drift back through the centuries to a time when the stones of Rome were still warm from the afternoon sun. The day is ending. You can hear the distant clatter of cartwheels on basalt paving stones, the sound growing softer as the last of the farmers head home beyond the city walls. From an open window somewhere down your narrow street, the smell of wood smoke and roasting garlic drifts on the cooling air. Imagine yourself here, in a simple room, a low couch, a clay lamp flickering in the corner, casting long, dancing shadows that make the space seem alive and breathing. But you're not quite comfortable. There's a dull ache behind your eyes, a slight warmth to your skin that wasn't there this morning. A weariness has settled deep into your bones. It's a familiar feeling, the creeping onset of a fever perhaps. But in your time, the explanation isn't a virus, a microscopic invader. No, the cause is far grander, far more personal. Your first thought, as you lie there, is a simple, unsettling question. Who have I angered? Because here illness often begins with the divine. The world is awash with gods, spirits and unseen forces, and your health is tied directly to your relationship with them. Perhaps you forgot an offering to the Lares, the guardian spirits of your home. Maybe you spoke ill of someone favoured by Juno, or walked through a sacred grove without the proper respect. Sickness is a message, a sign of displeasure, and so your first course of action is not to reach for a remedy, but to engage in a kind of spiritual diplomacy. You might whisper a quiet prayer to Salus, the goddess of health and well-being, her serene face a common sight on the coins that jingle in your pouch. You promise a better offering, a more devout attitude, if she would only lift this heavy feeling from you. If your fever worsens, your family might decide it's time for a more significant appeal. They would take you, perhaps by litter, if you are weak, through the bustling streets to one of the city's healing temples. The most famous of these belong to Aesculapius, a god of medicine imported from Greece, his symbol a serpent coiled around a staff, an image that has, rather remarkably, survived the millennia. The temple of Aesculapius isn't like a modern hospital. It's more of a sanctuary, a spa, and a holy place all rolled into one. It's often built near a spring, the clean, running water considered sacred and restorative in itself. The air is thick with the sweet, heavy scent of incense, and the silence is punctuated only by the soft murmurs of priests and the gentle cooing of doves. Here you would perform purifying rituals, washing your hands and face in the cool spring water. You would leave an offering, a small terracotta model of the afflicted body part, perhaps a little clay head to represent your headache, or a miniature liver if the pain is deeper. These small, hopeful statues pile up in the temple's treasury, a silent testament to countless ailments. Then comes the main event. This is the source of a particularly curious practice that historians still find fascinating. You would be led into a special dormitory called an abaton. Here, with other supplicants, you would lie down on a simple mat and try to sleep. This isn't just for rest. It's a sacred ritual known as dream incubation. The belief is that in your slumber, the god himself, or one of his sacred and non-venomous snakes, will visit you. The god might appear in your dream and tell you exactly what you need to do to be cured. Eat honey for 3 days, or go and walk barefoot by the river. Or, in a slightly more unsettling scenario, one of the temple snakes might slither over and lick your afflicted area, bestowing a divine cure. You can just imagine waking up to that. It would certainly be enough to make you forget you ever had a headache. The next morning, a priest would help you interpret your dream, translating the divine message into a practical, if sometimes cryptic, treatment plan. But Roman society, for all its deep-seated piety, was also intensely practical. They conquered the known world with logistics and engineering, not just prayers. And as their empire grew, it absorbed knowledge as readily as it absorbed territory. From the Greeks came a more philosophical, a more systematic way of looking at the body, a system that didn't necessarily replace the gods, but worked alongside them. Historians still argue whether the average Roman embraced Greek medicine eagerly, or viewed it with the same suspicion they held for many foreign ideas. For many, it was probably a bit of both. You'd pray to Aesculapius, but you'd also hedge your bets with this newfangled theory. This theory is centered on the four humours. It's an idea that will dominate Western medicine for over 1,500 years, so it's worth understanding. It's beautifully simple, in a way. Your body is thought to contain four essential fluids, or humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humour is linked to one of the four classical elements: air, water, fire, and earth, and possesses two of the four qualities: hot, cold, wet, or dry. Blood is hot and wet like air. Phlegm is cold and wet like water. Yellow bile is hot and dry like fire. And black bile is cold and dry like earth. A healthy person has these four fluids in perfect balance. Illness, therefore, is simply an imbalance. So, as you lie there with your fever, a Greek-trained practitioner wouldn't ask who you've angered. He'd surmise you have an excess of blood, the hot and wet humour. Your personality, your very temperament is also tied to these fluids. A sanguine person, happy and optimistic, has a predominance of blood. A phlegmatic person is calm and unemotional. A choleric person is fiery and angry, full of yellow bile. And a melancholic person, sad and thoughtful, is influenced by black bile. It's almost like an ancient personality quiz where the results could diagnose you with a cold. The treatment is logical, if a bit simplistic, to restore balance. If you have an excess of a hot and wet humour, the cure involves introducing things that are cold and dry. Certain foods, certain herbs, a change in environment. Alongside the gods and the humours, there is a third, ever-present suspect for your illness. Bad air. Miasma. You don't need a priest or a philosopher to tell you that the stench from a swamp or the foul air of a crowded, unsanitary alley feels unhealthy. The Romans, with their keen observational skills, connected foul odours with disease. They noticed that people who lived near marshes, like the great Pontine marshes outside Rome, often fell ill with recurring fevers, what we would now call malaria. Their explanation was that the swamp itself exhaled a toxic mist, a miasma, that poisoned the air and entered the body. They weren't right about the mechanism. It was mosquitoes, not mist. But their conclusion was spot on. Living near a swamp was a bad idea. This belief in miasma would fuel some of their greatest achievements in public health, things you see every day, like the great aqueducts that bring clean water into the city and the sewers that carry waste away. But before you call in a professional, there is one last line of defense. The head of your household, the paterfamilias. The traditional Roman father was expected to be the guardian of his family's health. Figures like Cato the Elder were famously distrustful of the slick, Greek-speaking doctors setting up shop in the city, viewing them as effeminate charlatans. Cato insisted on traditional Roman cures, remedies passed down through generations. And his cure for almost everything, it seems, was cabbage. Yes, cabbage. Eaten raw, eaten cooked, applied as a plaster, used in a poultice. Cato believed cabbage could cure wounds, indigestion, and even drunkenness. He would stand over you, a stern look on his face, prescribing a regimen of cabbage and maybe some harsh local wine. It's the ancient equivalent of a parent telling you to just rub some dirt on it, only with more brassicas. So there you lie in the fading light. Your head still aches. Is it the displeasure of the gods, an imbalance in your humours, the bad air from the nearby Tiber, or simply a lack of cabbage in your diet? In the world of Roman medicine, the answer could very well be all of the above. And as your feverish mind drifts, you begin to wonder if perhaps it's time to seek out someone with a little more training than your father. Someone who claims to know the secrets of the human body. The night passes in a restless haze. The cabbage poultice your father insisted on has done little more than make your bed smell like a market stall, and the fever still clings to you like a damp wool cloak. It seems the gods are not answering, your humours are still out of sorts, and a more practised hand is needed. As morning breaks, casting a pale, dusty light into your room, you decide it's time to see a medicus. Finding one is not difficult. Rome is teeming with them. In fact, anyone with a bit of Greek, a collection of jars and enough confidence can call themselves a medicus. There's no official board certification, no standardized medical school. This is the free market at its most exciting. Your neighbour might swear by a fellow who specializes in eye ailments, the medicus ocularius, who operates from a small booth near the Forum, while the baker down the street insists you see a woman from Alexandria, whose poultices are legendary. The title of medicus is a broad one, covering everyone from highly educated theorists who studied in Alexandria or Athens to itinerant quacks who sell cure-all tonics at a street corner. Many of them are freedmen, former slaves from the Greek-speaking East, whose education made them more valuable in a sick room than a quarry. This, of course, does little to soothe the anxieties of traditionalists like Cato, who saw them as snake oil salesmen whispering foreign nonsense. You decide on a medicus with a modest but clean-looking shop, a taberna tucked between a weaver and a wine merchant. The sign outside is simple, depicting a cupping vessel and a scalpel, which is either reassuringly professional or slightly terrifying. You can't quite decide. You push aside the heavy curtain hanging in the doorway and step inside. The air is immediately different. It's a complex and strangely clean smell, a mix of dried herbs like mint and fennel, the sharp tang of vinegar, and the heavy, sweet scent of lanolin used in salves. The room is small and dim. Jars of all sizes line the shelves, some containing cloudy liquids, others filled with dried leaves, roots and minerals. Papyrus scrolls, mostly Greek medical texts by figures like Hippocrates, are stacked in a corner. On a low wooden table, you see a set of bronze and iron tools neatly arranged on a clean linen cloth. Some look unnervingly familiar, probes, forceps, scalpels, while others are more mysterious. It feels like a space of serious purpose. The medicus himself is a slight man with kind, tired eyes. He listens patiently as you describe your fever, your headache, the weariness. He doesn't interrupt. He then begins his examination, but it's a gentle process. He feels the pulse at your wrist, noting its speed and strength. He asks you to stick out your tongue. He might peer into your eyes and ask you about your diet for the past week, your daily activities, even the quality of the air where you live. He may even ask for a urine sample, which he'll inspect for colour and cloudiness, maybe even taking a tiny taste. A practice which, thankfully, has not stood the test of time. His diagnosis is delivered in a calm, steady voice. He speaks of your humours. Your fever and flushed skin clearly indicate an excess of blood. Too much heat, too much moisture. The world inside you is unbalanced, like a rainstorm in the middle of a dry summer. The treatment he prescribes is therefore aimed at restoring that equilibrium. First, a change in diet, no more wine or red meat for a while. Instead, he suggests cooling foods, cucumbers, melons, and certain types of fish. He then prepares a remedy for you, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle and mixing them with honey to form a thick, dark paste you are to take twice a day. He may also suggest a clyster, an enema, to help purge the body of excess humours. And if the fever is particularly stubborn, he might propose bloodletting, either by making a small, clean cut on your arm or by using heated bronze cups to draw blood to the surface. It sounds dramatic, but it's based on the clear logic of the humoral system. If you have too much of something, you simply remove some of it. It's the ancient world's version of, have you tried turning it off and on again? You pay him a modest fee, take your herbal concoction, and head home, feeling perhaps a little more hopeful. The care you received was personal, thoughtful, and based on a complete, if incorrect, system of logic. This is the experience of a civilian. But now, let your mind drift from the noisy, crowded streets of Rome. Travel north to the cold, damp frontier of Britannia. The green hills are shrouded in mist, and a steady drizzle chills you to the bone. Here you are not a citizen with a headache. You are a legionary, a soldier of the empire. Your health is not just your own concern, it is an asset to the state. And the Roman army, a marvel of organization, does not leave the well-being of its soldiers to chance or the whims of the marketplace. Let's say you take a bad fall while on patrol, or worse, you catch a spear in your thigh during a skirmish with a local tribe. You won't be looking for a taberna with a nice sign. You'll be carried back to the fortress, to a building unlike almost any other in the Roman world, the Valetudinarium. This is the military hospital, and it is a truly remarkable invention, a testament to Roman pragmatism. From the outside, it is a large rectangular building, fitting in neatly with the barracks and the praetorium. But inside, its design is unique and purposeful. You are carried through a main entrance into a long corridor that runs around a large, open-air central courtyard. The layout is intentionally separated from the noise of the main fort, designed for peace and quiet. Leading off this main corridor are dozens of small rooms like little wards. Each room might hold just 3 or 4 soldiers, keeping the sick separated and reducing the risk of a single illness spreading through the entire hospital. It's a level of forethought that feels startlingly modern. The whole building is designed with health in mind, based on their best understanding of disease. Large windows and the open courtyard provide ample light and ventilation, a direct countermeasure to that dreaded miasma we talked about earlier. There are dedicated latrines and a good water supply, because they knew that filth bred sickness. Historians have excavated these hospitals from Scotland to Romania, and their layout is surprisingly consistent. Inside, you aren't treated by a single, all-purpose medicus. The army has a full medical corps. There are the medici ordinarii, the general doctors, but for your leg wound, you'll be seen by a medicus chirurgus, a surgeon, who has specific training in treating battlefield injuries. There are orderlies and administrative staff to keep the hospital running smoothly. There's even a capsarius, a medical orderly who carries a box, capsar, of bandages and basic tools onto the battlefield itself for immediate first aid. This entire system, provided free to you as a soldier, is an incredible feat of logistics. While the emperor in Rome might enjoy the services of a famed personal physician, it is here, on the rugged edge of the empire, that you see the full might of organized Roman medicine. As the surgeon cleans your wound with sour wine, an effective antiseptic, he works with a cool, practiced efficiency. The surgical tools he uses are sophisticated, and his job is to get you back on your feet and back in the fighting line as quickly as possible. Of course, a hospital is still a dangerous place. Infection is a constant, unseen enemy, but your chances of survival here, in this clean, organized building, are vastly better than they would be in a filthy, crowded room back home. There's an ongoing discussion about just how these institutions were used. Historians still argue whether these valetudinaria were reserved strictly for active soldiers, or if, during times of peace, they might have extended their care to the soldiers' families or even friendly local leaders. The evidence is scarce, but it's a tantalizing thought that these islands of organized medicine might have occasionally served the wider community. And one of the most curious fringe tidbits found in these frontier forts are sets of specialized gynecological tools, suggesting that perhaps midwives were also at work, helping with the births of the next generation of Romans on the very edge of the known world. It complicates the picture of these facilities as being purely for male soldiers. Lying on your cot in the quiet ward, listening to the rain, drumming softly on the roof, you reflect on the two different worlds of Roman medicine. In the city, healing is a transaction, a matter of individual choice and commercial enterprise. Out here, on the frontier, it is a state-sponsored system, an essential part of the great military machine that holds the empire together. One is based on commerce, the other on cold, hard logistics. And you have to admit, as you drift off under the influence of a pain-dulling draft, the logistical approach has its benefits. Back in Rome, let's imagine your fever has passed, thanks either to the doctor's herbs, your own immune system, or perhaps the cabbage really did work its magic. But not all ailments are so simple. Roman life, like any other, is filled with injuries, chronic conditions, and dental woes. And for these, the Roman medicus had a kit of tools and a pharmacy of remedies that ranged from the brilliantly effective to the utterly bizarre. Let's revisit that doctor's taberna. This time you're just a curious observer. You watch as a man comes in, a deep gash on his forearm from a mishap at his workshop. He needs more than a cooling diet. This is where the surgical side of Roman medicine comes into play, a field where they made impressive strides, building upon the foundations laid by the Greeks and Egyptians. The medicus works with a calm intensity. He first washes his hands and then cleans the wound, likely with vinegar or wine. The antiseptic properties of both were well understood, even if the reason why they worked was not. Then he inspects the damage. The tools he lays out on his clean linen cloth are fascinating. Made of bronze, iron, or sometimes even steel, they are a marvel of ancient craftsmanship. You see fine-toothed forceps for pulling out splinters or foreign objects, and sharp, curved probes for exploring the depth of a wound. For cutting, there are scalpels of various shapes and sizes. The scalpellus, with its leaf-shaped steel blade, looks almost identical to its modern counterpart. If a bone is broken, there are bone saws and drills. They even possess a rather intimidating tool for arrow extractions, known as the spoon of Diocles, a long-handled scoop designed to remove a barbed arrowhead without causing more damage on the way out. It's an elegant, if painful, solution to a common battlefield problem. For the man's gash, the medicus decides stitches are needed. He threads a fine bronze needle with a thread made of flax or even a fine animal sinew, and meticulously sews the wound closed. He may also use metal clips, like ancient staples to hold the edges of the skin together. Afterwards, he applies a dressing. This won't be a simple bandage, it will be a poultice, perhaps of mallow leaves or fenugreek, mixed with honey for its antibacterial properties, and lanolin to keep the dressing from sticking to the wound. He instructs the man to keep it clean and to return in a few days. The whole procedure is swift, precise, and based on principles of cleanliness and direct intervention that we can still appreciate. They could set fractures, perform amputations, drain abscesses, and even perform a type of brain surgery called trepanation, drilling a hole in the skull. Though whether this was for spiritual reasons or to relieve pressure is still a matter of scholarly debate. They were, in short, surprisingly good surgeons. But what about the pharmacy? This is where things get truly creative. Roman remedies were drawn from three main kingdoms: mineral, vegetable, and animal. The mineral and vegetable pharmacopoeia had a lot going for it. They used willow bark, which contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin for pain and fever. They had poppy juice, opium, a powerful and effective painkiller they used with caution, fennel for digestion, mint to soothe the stomach, silphium, a plant sadly driven to extinction, possibly by overharvesting, as a contraceptive. Their knowledge of botany was extensive. It was a science built on centuries of trial and error. Some herbs worked, others didn't. The effective ones were recorded in detailed texts, with recipes for different preparations, teas, tinctures, powders, and salves. Then we come to the animal kingdom. And this is where a modern person might begin to politely back away from the counter. The thinking was often based on a kind of sympathetic magic. To cure a lung problem, for instance, you might be prescribed the dried, powdered lung of a fox. To cure baldness, one rather hopeful recipe involved a salve made from the fat of a bear. Some cures are stranger still. Pliny the Elder, a sort of walking encyclopedia of the Roman world, catalogued a bewildering array of these treatments in his Natural History. He writes of epilepsy being treated by drinking the blood of a slain gladiator, a practice that combined sympathetic magic with a belief in the power of a life force. He mentions toothaches being cured by boiling a frog in wine and vinegar and dripping the concoction into the afflicted ear. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our distant cousins in Egypt? The Romans weren't quite so exotic, but they weren't far off. The liver of a weasel, the ashes of a burned dog's head, the saliva of a fasting man, the list is long and deeply strange. One particularly quirky but widespread remedy involved something that was, at least, readily available: human urine. It was considered a powerful curative, especially aged urine. Its ammonia content made it an effective cleaning agent, and it was used as a laundry detergent and even a tooth whitener. A Gallic import, apparently. One can only imagine the dinner party conversations. "You have such bright teeth, Lucius." "Why, thank you, Flavia. It's the imported vintage from Gaul." Beneath all this, however, lay that constant guiding principle: diet. Good health began at the table. For a mainstream Roman physician, like the Greek-trained doctor we met, diet wasn't about losing weight, but about balancing your internal ecosystem. Foods were classified as hot, cold, wet, or dry, just like the humours. A patient with a cold, wet ailment, like a persistent cough, thought to be an excess of phlegm, would be prescribed hot, dry foods like garlic, pepper, and roasted meats. The cabbage Cato the Elder was so fond of was considered a wonderful all-purpose balancer, a belief he promoted with almost fanatical devotion. And then there's Cato's truly wild cure-all, a recipe involving cabbage soaked in the urine of someone who had been eating a lot of cabbage. It was the ancient world's version of a medical perpetual motion machine. Historians find these detailed dietary prescriptions fascinating because they show a holistic approach to health, connecting food, environment, and physical well-being in a way that modern wellness gurus would recognize instantly. And what if your ailment was dental? The Romans, with their gritty bread and diet rich in honey and dates, suffered from their fair share of tooth decay. A visit to the tooth drawer, a specialist, but often also just the local barber or a brave medicus, was a dreaded event. They had forceps for extractions and small files to smooth down rough teeth. They could make rudimentary fillings using a mix of powdered herbs and lead, and they were quite skilled at creating dental bridges and crowns out of gold wire and bone, or even using the teeth of deceased individuals. It was more about cosmetics than function, but it shows a desire to maintain appearances even in the face of dental disaster. So you stand there, in the quiet taberna, surrounded by the tools and ingredients of healing. On one shelf you have effective botanical remedies and surgical tools of elegant design. On another, jars of powdered fox lung and recipes calling for gladiator blood. It's a world of stark contrasts. Practical observational science sits right next to what we would consider wild superstition. It reminds you that the path to knowledge is never a straight line. It's a messy, winding road, full of good ideas, strange detours, and the occasional boiled frog. And as the medicus carefully puts away his surgical tools, you are struck by the immense and difficult task he faces every day, trying to mend the fragile human body with only the knowledge and the resources his age has given him. The sun is setting now over the 7 hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The hum of the city begins to soften. You can see the grand structures that define Rome, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the vast public baths, their stone surfaces glowing in the final light. And it's in looking at these immense public works that you realize something fundamental about Roman medicine. So far we've focused on the personal, the dream at the temple, the visit to the medicus, the surgeon's scalpel. But perhaps Rome's greatest contribution to health wasn't a cure or a tool, but an idea built in stone and mortar: public health. The Romans might not have known about germs, but they understood filth. They understood in that pragmatic way of theirs that clean water, efficient waste disposal, and public hygiene were essential for the well-being of a city of 1 million people. The most visible evidence of this, of course, are the aqueducts. These are not just beautiful architectural achievements. They are monumental pieces of medical equipment. 11 major aqueducts fed the city, carrying a constant supply of fresh, clean water from the distant hills. This water supplied the grand public fountains, where anyone could collect water for their home. It also fed the public latrines and, most impressively, the great public baths. The baths were the heart of Roman social life, but they were also central to public health. For a small fee, any citizen could spend an afternoon in these sprawling complexes. You would move through a series of rooms, from the warm tepidarium to the hot, steamy caldarium, and finally, a bracing plunge into the cold, frigidarium. You would scrape your skin clean with a curved metal tool called a strigil, removing dirt and oil. It was a place for cleansing, exercise, and relaxation. While sharing bath water with hundreds of your fellow citizens might not seem perfectly hygienic by our standards, the constant flow of fresh water from the aqueducts made it far cleaner than you might imagine. In an age of miasma and bad air, the baths represented a communal effort to promote cleanliness and, by extension, health. And what goes in must come out. The Romans built one of the world's earliest and most effective sewer systems, the Cloaca Maxima. This great sewer, and the network of smaller channels that fed it, carried rainwater and waste out of the city and into the Tiber River. It was a grimy, thankless feat of engineering that did more to prevent waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid than any herbal remedy ever could. This combination of aqueducts, baths and sewers created an environment far healthier than that of any comparable ancient city, or indeed most European cities until the 19th century. This is perhaps Rome's most mainstream and most significant historical fact in medicine. They engineered a healthier society. Amidst this world of grand public works and folk remedies, one figure rose to such prominence that his name would become almost synonymous with medicine for the next 1,500 years. Galen of Pergamon. To speak of medicine in the Roman Empire without speaking of Galen is like discussing physics without mentioning Newton. He was a Greek physician who made his name in Rome in the 2nd century AD, eventually becoming the personal physician to several emperors, including Marcus Aurelius. Galen was a force of nature. He was a brilliant anatomist, a tireless researcher, and a ferociously confident, almost arrogant public intellectual. He built upon the Hippocratic theory of the four humours, but sought to place it on a more rigorous, scientific footing. Because Roman law forbade the dissection of human bodies, Galen did the next best thing. He dissected animals, pigs, goats, and most famously Barbary apes, whose anatomy he believed was closest to that of humans. He would perform public dissections, wowing crowds with his anatomical knowledge and surgical skill, often humiliating his medical rivals in the process. He correctly identified that arteries carry blood, not air, as was previously thought, and made incredible discoveries about the function of the nervous system by meticulously cutting spinal cords at different levels on living animals to show which parts of the body were paralyzed. Galen was a prolific writer, churning out hundreds of treatises on medicine, philosophy, and anatomy. His works were a comprehensive, systematic explanation for everything about the human body. He took the elegant simplicity of the four humours and backed it with what appeared to be irrefutable anatomical proof. His system was so complete, so all-encompassing, that it left little room for argument. And so, for centuries after the Roman Empire fell, his word became medical dogma. To question Galen was to question truth itself. This had a profound and ultimately stunting effect. For over a millennium, physicians studied Galen's texts instead of dissecting human bodies. As a result, his mistakes, based on his animal dissections, such as his description of a multi-lobed human liver, correct for an ape but not a person, were repeated and taught as fact well into the Renaissance. His genius was so bright it cast a shadow that prevented others from seeing for themselves. But as the Western Roman Empire slowly crumbles, this intricate system begins to fall apart. The aqueducts break down and are not repaired. The great baths fall into disuse. The medical libraries are lost or destroyed. Knowledge of Greek, the language of Galen and Hippocrates, fades in the West. Medicine retreats. It goes back to where we started, becoming a simpler mix of folk remedies and prayers, practiced largely by monks in isolated monasteries who preserved a few precious Latin translations of the ancient medical texts. It's a sobering thought. All that sophisticated knowledge, the hospitals, the surgical tools, the public health infrastructure could be lost. And yet, echoes remain. They always do. You can see the ghost of Roman medicine all around us, if you know where to look. That serpent staff of Aesculapius still adorns our ambulances and medical buildings. The the very language of medicine is steeped in Latin. We still talk about temperament in terms of humours, sanguine, melancholic, even if we don't believe in them anymore. The layout of that military valetudinarium presaged the ward design of modern hospitals. The idea that diet and environment are crucial to health feels more relevant than ever. The Romans, with their strange mix of methodical observation and magical thinking, laid a foundation. It was an imperfect foundation, full of misplaced confidence and incorrect assumptions. But it was a start. As the last light of our journey fades and true night settles over the city, you are left with a quiet sense of continuity. The desire to understand the body, to heal its afflictions and to ward off the finality of death is a thread that connects us directly to that Roman, lying in their room so long ago, wondering if it was a god, a humour, or the air itself that had made them ill. The questions have changed, the answers have evolved beyond their wildest dreams, but the fundamental human impulse remains exactly the same. Hygiene in the Middle Ages. Let the world around you grow quiet now. Let the screen in front of you fade into a gentle, soft glow. We're going to drift back in time again, but to a different place. Leave behind the sun-warmed marble of Rome and let your mind settle in a cooler, damper climate. The air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, sweet smell of hay. The year is uncertain, perhaps 1350, perhaps 1420, but the feeling is the same. The age of great empires has passed, and a new world has taken its place. Imagine yourself waking, not to the sound of an alarm, but to a subtle shift in the light filtering through the waxed linen or shuttered glass of a small window. It's morning, but the sun is not yet high. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's a damp chill that seeps into the small room. You burrow deeper for a moment under a heavy wool blanket and a scratchy linen sheet. Your breath mists in the air before you. The room is simple. The walls made of timber and wattle and daub, the floor of packed earth or rough-hewn wooden planks. You swing your legs out of the low bed, your bare feet meeting the cold floor. It's a sensation that wakes you up faster than any coffee. Before you do anything else, your first task of the day awaits. Under the bed is a simple ceramic or pewter vessel, the chamber pot. It holds the waste from the night, and dealing with it is a non-negotiable part of the morning routine. This small, unglamorous pot is the front line of domestic hygiene. It keeps the waste contained and out of the bedsheets. Emptying it is the first chore of the day, and let's be honest, it's nobody's favourite. You will carry it outside to a designated privy in the back garden, or, if you live in a crowded town, perhaps to a collection barrel or a gutter in the street. With that unpleasantness handled, your thoughts turn to getting clean. The popular image of the Middle Ages is one of grime and filth, of people going months or years without washing. And while their standards of sanitation were certainly not ours, the idea that they revelled in dirt is a misunderstanding. Cleanliness was valued, but it was understood differently. It was deeply connected to piety and social standing. You move to a small wooden stand in the corner of your room. On it sits a set of items that form the core of your daily grooming, a basin and a ewer. The ewer is a large pitcher, perhaps made of pottery or pewter if you are more well-to-do. The basin is a wide, shallow bowl to match. These aren't just for show, they are essential household tools. You pour water from the ewer into the basin. The water is cold. There is no hot setting on a medieval ewer. There's cold from the well, and in winter, very cold from the well. This is your sink. You splash the cold water on your face, rubbing your eyes clear of sleep. You then wash your hands. This is the most important part of the ritual. Hand washing was a constant in medieval life, a practice driven by both practicality and religious devotion. You would wash your hands upon waking after visiting the privy, and most importantly, before and after every meal. This was not just about removing dirt, it was a powerful social signal. At a banquet, a servant would bring a ewer and basin to the guests of honor to wash their hands publicly. It was a sign of respect and refinement. At home, it's a quieter ritual, but just as significant. Do you use soap? Perhaps. Soap, made from animal fat and ash, has been around for a long time. It was a common, if not luxurious, household good. It was often coarse and unscented, more functional than pampering, smelling faintly of lye. Or you might use soapwort, a plant whose leaves and roots produce a gentle lather when agitated in water. You scrub your hands, your face, and your neck, the cold water and rough soap waking up your skin. You dry yourself with a piece of linen, a towel that might also serve several other purposes around the house. Now your attention turns to your hair. On the stand next to the basin is a comb. This is a treasured personal item. It might be made of bone, wood, or ivory, and is often a dual-sided tool. One side with wide teeth for working through the bigger tangles in your long hair, and a finer side for combing out any tiny, unwelcome residents that might have taken up lodging overnight. Head lice were a simple fact of life, and daily combing was the best way to keep them in check. You meticulously comb your hair, braiding it or pinning it up to keep it out of the way for the day's work. And what about your teeth? The image of the medieval peasant with a mouth of black stumps isn't entirely accurate. People did care about their teeth, and they had methods for cleaning them. A common practice was to rub your teeth and gums with a piece of rough linen cloth. Sometimes you might dip the cloth in a mixture of salt and soot, or powdered herbs like sage, to act as a mild abrasive and freshener. You might also chew on a twig of birch or hazel to scrub your teeth, or chew on parsley, mint or cloves to freshen your breath. They may not have had fluoride, but they did not simply let their teeth rot without a fight. One mainstream historical fact is that dozens of dental recipes survive from the period, most involving herbal powders and washes. Historians still argue whether the poorest of peasants had the means or the time for more than a quick splash in a stream. But for anyone from a middling tradesperson to a noble, these morning rituals of washing and grooming were a fundamental part of the day. This entire process is underscored by a powerful belief system. Cleanliness for you is not just about health in a physical sense. You've been taught from the pulpit that cleanliness is next to godliness. A clean body was seen as a reflection of a pure soul. When you wash your hands, you might whisper a short prayer, connecting the physical act of washing away dirt with the spiritual act of washing away sin. The water itself is a symbol of baptism and spiritual rebirth. This wasn't about killing germs, the concept was centuries away. It was about presenting yourself clean and ordered before God and before your community. A disheveled, dirty appearance signaled moral laziness, a disregard for social norms and a disrespect for God's creation, your own body. One quirky little tidbit from the era is the napkin, from the old French nappy. At the dining table, because you often ate with your hands, the tablecloth itself often served as a communal napkin for wiping your fingers and mouth. Individual napkins were a luxury. This makes the ritual of pre-dinner hand-washing even more critical. You had to arrive at the table with clean hands because things were about to get a little bit messy. You are now washed, combed and dressed in simple linen undergarments and a woolen tunic. You feel fresh, awake, and ready. Your personal space is clean. Your body is clean. You have attended to the small, vital rituals that separate the order of the home from the potential chaos of the world outside. The day has been properly started, not just physically, but spiritually. And as you unbolt your door to let in the morning light, you feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. It's a feeling rooted in the simple, deliberate act of making things clean. Section 2. Your morning ablutions with the basin and ewer are complete, and they suffice for the daily grime. But sometimes you need something more, a deeper clean, the kind that requires full immersion and a bit more effort. It's time to consider the bath. And in the Middle Ages, the bath is a surprisingly varied and social affair. It's not the solitary, private ritual we think of today. Let's imagine it's the end of a long week. You've been working hard, perhaps in the fields, in a dusty workshop, or tending the hearth. You feel a layer of grit on your skin that a simple wash won't remove. Your first option, and the most common for a household of modest means, is a bath right here at home. This doesn't involve a dedicated bathroom with plumbed-in fixtures. A bathroom is simply any room where you happen to be taking a bath. The central piece of equipment is a large, portable wooden tub. It's essentially a half barrel, wide and shallow. This tub is a valuable household item and is usually stored away, perhaps in a shed or an outbuilding. On bath day, it is dragged into the house and placed in the warmest room, typically near the main fireplace in the hall. Getting ready is a major undertaking. Buckets and buckets of water must be hauled from the well or a nearby stream. Some are poured into the tub cold, while others are heated in a large cauldron over the fire and then added carefully to bring the tub up to a pleasant temperature. This is a laborious process that could take an hour or more and consume a significant amount of precious firewood. Because of this effort, the bath water, once heated, is not just for one person. It's a resource to be shared. There's a pecking order, of course. The head of the household, the lord or the master of the house, gets to go first, when the water is hottest and cleanest. Then comes his wife, then the children, from oldest to youngest. And finally, if there's any warmth left, the servants or apprentices might get a turn. By the end of this sequence, the water is likely a lukewarm, murky soup. It's certainly not the spa-like experience we might crave, but it gets the job done. In the tub, you'd have your block of coarse soap and a cloth for scrubbing. You might add fragrant herbs to the water, chamomile, lavender, or rosemary, to make it more pleasant and to scent your skin. It's a rare and welcome luxury. For the wealthy, the experience is considerably more pleasant. If you are a lady in a great castle, your bath will be prepared for you in your private chambers. Servants will bring the tub, haul the water, and heat it. They might line the wooden tub with a linen cloth to protect you from splinters. A small but significant touch of class. The room will be closed off with curtains or screens for privacy and to keep in the warmth. A wooden stool might even be placed in the tub for you to sit on. After your bath, you would be wrapped in warm linen towels and could relax by the fire. It's still a major production, but one where all the labor is done by others. But there is another option, one that takes you out of the house and into the heart of your town's social life. The public bathhouse, or stew. This is where medieval bathing gets truly interesting and complicated. Public bathhouses, a tradition inherited from the Romans but scaled down, were common features of medieval cities and towns. Remember those Roman baths? These are their distant, more intimate cousins. They were commercial enterprises, often run by a bath keeper, and you would pay a fee to enter. You push open the door to the bathhouse and are immediately hit by a wall of warm, steamy air thick with the smell of wet wood, herbs and damp bodies. It's a loud, social place. You'd undress in a small antechamber, leaving your clothes with an attendant, and then step into the main bathing area. Here you'll find several large wooden tubs filled with hot water, often big enough for 2 or even 4 people to share. And sharing is the operative word. Men and women sometimes bathed together, a fact that endlessly scandalized the more pious moralists of the day. Bathing was often just one of the services on offer. Attendants, known as stewmongers, could be hired to scrub your back. A barber surgeon might be on hand to offer a shave, a haircut, or even to perform minor medical procedures like bloodletting or tooth pulling. Think of it as a one-stop shop for all your grooming and minor health needs. You could even get a meal. Attendants would bring trays of food and wine that floated on wooden planks in the tubs. You could sit back in the hot water, share a tub with friends or neighbors, gossip, make business deals and enjoy a roasted chicken. It's the medieval equivalent of a spa day combined with a business lunch. This incredibly social and sometimes rowdy nature of the public bathhouse is one of the most surprising mainstream facts of medieval life. The church, of course, had a complicated relationship with these places. On the one hand, they praised cleanliness. On the other, they were deeply suspicious of the opportunities for vice that these public, often co-ed bathhouses presented. They worried about drunkenness, gluttony, and a host of other sins that might thrive in the warm, relaxed atmosphere of the stews. It's a classic medieval conflict. The practical need for cleanliness bumping up against the moral fear of temptation. Now for a quirky tidbit from the world of noble bathing, the bath squire. In a royal or very high-status household, there was an actual servant whose job title was essentially this. He was in charge of every aspect of his lord's bath, procuring the tub, testing the water temperature, sourcing the finest soaps and fragrant herbs, and making sure the linen towels were soft and warm. It was a position of great trust. After all, you're at your most vulnerable in the bath, and this squire was one of the few people allowed into that private space. The decline of these public bathhouses in the late Middle Ages is a topic historians still discuss. Some argue it was the rising moral condemnations from the church that finally turned public opinion against them. Others point to a new and devastating factor, the Black Death. After the plague swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, medical theory began to change. The prevailing humoral theory suggested that disease entered the body through the pores of the skin. A hot bath, it was feared, opened up these pores, making you more vulnerable to the corrupt, pestilential air, the miasma, that was believed to carry the plague. Suddenly, the relaxing social bathhouse seemed like a death trap. A public health initiative turned into a public health hazard. One by one, the stews began to close and bathing became a more private and, for many, a much less frequent affair. Whether you're in a simple half-barrel at home, sharing your water with 5 other family members, or lounging in a public stew with a plate of food floating in front of you, the medieval bath is about more than just getting clean. It is a ritual that can be deeply private or boisterously public, a symbol of status, a moment of luxury, a place of business, and eventually a source of fear. It shows us a world where the lines between public and private, and between health and pleasure, were drawn very differently. Having attended to your personal hygiene, let's now widen our view. Step out of the warm, steamy atmosphere of the bathhouse and into the cool, morning air of a medieval town. Hygiene wasn't just a personal matter, it was a constant, challenging and communal struggle. The cleanliness of your home and your street had a direct impact on your well-being, and medieval people were far more aware of this than we often give them credit for. Let's start inside your house. If you are a simple town dweller, your home might consist of just 1 or 2 rooms that serve as a workshop, kitchen and sleeping area all at once. The floor is a key concern. In a very humble dwelling, it might be packed earth. This presented a constant problem of dampness and dirt. To combat this, a thick layer of fresh rushes or straw was often strewn across the floor. This wasn't just for insulation or comfort, it was a hygienic strategy. The rushes would absorb spills, mud tracked in from the street, and other household messes. Periodically, how often is a matter of some debate, this soiled layer would be swept out and replaced with fresh, sweet-smelling rushes. Some households would also mix in fragrant herbs like meadowsweet or chamomile, so that walking on the floor would release a pleasant scent. It was a simple, organic, and surprisingly effective form of disposable flooring. If you were a bit more prosperous, you might have rough wooden floorboards or even flagstones. These were easier to sweep clean, but the rushes might still be used for warmth and fragrance. The hearth is the center of the home, but its smoke is a major issue. Chimneys were a later medieval invention and slow to be adopted. For many, the smoke from the cooking fire simply filtered up through a hole in the roof. You can imagine the air quality, a perpetual haze of wood smoke that coated every surface in a fine layer of soot. It was a constant battle to keep textiles and surfaces clean. Food scraps, animal bones, and other kitchen waste had to be dealt with. Most would be collected in a bucket and either thrown onto a compost heap in the back garden, fed to the pigs, the ultimate medieval recycling unit, or carried out to a designated refuse pile known as a midden at the edge of the town. Keeping the inside of the home clear of decaying refuse was a priority, not because of a knowledge of bacteria, but because of a very keen understanding of smell and decay. Putrid smells were not just unpleasant, they were considered unhealthy, a sign of the dreaded miasma. Now let's address the privy. In a castle, you might have the relative luxury of a garderobe. This was a small room with a stone or wooden seat that opened directly over a shaft leading down the castle wall to a cesspit or the moat below. The name garderobe is wonderfully euphemistic, likely coming from the practice of hanging clothes in the shaft, as the ammonia from the waste was believed to kill moths and fleas. It's an ingenious, if not entirely fragrant, method of pest control, and a very memorable, quirky tidbit of castle life. For the average person in a town, the facilities were less grand. A small outhouse in the back garden was common, with a simple pit dug into the ground. When the pit was full, it would be covered over with earth and the outhouse moved to a new spot. In more densely packed urban areas, multiple households might share a privy built over a large brick-lined cesspit. These cesspits had to be emptied periodically, a truly thankless task performed by workers known as gong farmers or rakers. They could only work at night due to the horrific smell, and they would cart the night soil out of the town to be used as fertilizer on the surrounding fields. It was a dirty, difficult, but absolutely essential job. Now, take a deep breath and let's step out into the street. The medieval town is a full sensory experience. The air is thick with sounds and smells. You hear the ringing of a blacksmith's hammer, the rumble of a wooden cart, the cries of vendors selling everything from hot pies to fresh eels. The smell is a complex mix of wood smoke, baking bread, livestock, and other things. The state of the streets is one of the most persistent images of the medieval period, often pictured as rivers of filth. The reality is more complicated. The streets were rarely paved. They were mostly dirt or gravel, which quickly turned to thick, clinging mud in the frequent rain. Household waste was a major problem. While towns had regulations against it, the temptation to simply toss a bucket of dirty water or the contents of a chamber pot out the window, shouting "Garde-lou," component placement a corruption of the French "gare à l'eau," or "watch out for the water," was often too great. Animals roamed freely. Pigs, chickens and geese wandered the lanes, which was a double-edged sword. On one hand, they were a source of muck. On the other, the pigs in particular acted as an unofficial sanitation squad, eating much of the organic refuse that ended up in the streets. However, it's a mainstream historical fact that medieval town councils were constantly fighting a war against filth. Surviving town records are filled with regulations aimed at keeping the streets clean. There were fines for dumping waste illegally. Householders were often required to keep the area in front of their own property clean. Butchers were given specific instructions on how and where to dispose of blood and offal. Certain noxious trades like tanning, which used dung and urine, were often relegated to the outskirts of town, downwind from the residential areas. There were public rakers tasked with scraping the worst of the muck from the main thoroughfares. Historians still argue whether these regulations were born from a genuine concern for public health, or were more about civic pride and keeping the main streets presentable for important visitors. The answer is likely a bit of both. They may not have had germ theory, but they instinctively knew that living in a sea of waste was not good. They could connect the foul stench of a clogged gutter with outbreaks of disease. Their efforts were constantly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the problem, but it's crucial to remember that they were trying. They didn't simply accept filth as their fate. The image of the medieval citizen wallowing happily in grime is a caricature. The reality was a constant, frustrating and uphill battle for a semblance of urban cleanliness. So as you navigate your way down the street, you are mindful. You walk carefully to avoid the muddiest patches. You hold a scented cloth or a pomander to your nose as you pass the butcher's alley. You appreciate the hard work of the rakers who have cleared a path down the high street. You understand that your small, clean home is a sanctuary, an island of order in a world that is always threatening to overflow with mud, muck, and mire. This tension between the clean interior and the dirty exterior, between private effort and public struggle, defines the very essence of sanitation in the Middle Ages. The day draws to a close. The sounds of the workshop and the market begin to fade, replaced by the softer noises of evening. A dog barks in the distance, a church bell tolls for vespers, and the smell of countless cooking fires thickens the air. As dusk settles, we turn from the physical acts of washing and sweeping to the more subtle yet powerful realm of smell and spirit. In the medieval mind, hygiene was not just about what you could see. It was deeply intertwined with what you could smell, and by extension, what you believed. Let's go back inside your home. The main meal of the day is over. You've washed your hands again, using the ewer and basin. Now, as the room grows dark, you might light a tallow candle, which casts a flickering, smoky light and gives off a faint, fatty smell. Or, if you are wealthy, a beeswax candle which burns cleaner and has a delicate, honeyed aroma. This difference in scent is a small but constant reminder of social status. The fear of bad smells, that ever-present theory of miasma we've touched upon, governs many of your actions. The foul stench of decay, of stagnant water, of human waste, This was not just unpleasant, it was believed to be the literal vehicle of disease. Sickness, especially the plague, was thought to travel on these invisible, noxious winds. Therefore, to fight disease, you had to fight bad smells. Hygiene became a form of atmospheric warfare. This is where the use of scents becomes a crucial aspect of health and cleanliness. In your home, you might burn incense, not just for religious purposes, but to purify the air. Resins like frankincense and myrrh were believed to have powerful anti-pestilential properties. You might strew sweet-smelling herbs not just on the floor, but also among your stored clothes and linens to keep them fresh and deter moths. Lavender, rosemary, and mint were favorites. Remember those rushes on the floor? Choosing fragrant ones was a part of this fragrant defense system. The goal was to create a protective bubble of pleasant, healthy air around you and your family. You carry this concept with you when you leave the house. If you are a person of some means, you might carry a pomander. This is a small metal ball, often beautifully decorated with perforated holes. Inside, you would place a mixture of potent aromatic substances: cloves, cinnamon, musk, ambergris, or a complex blend of dried flowers and spices. When walking through a particularly foul-smelling part of town, you would hold this pomander to your nose, inhaling its protective fragrance and, in your mind, warding off the dangerous miasma. It was a personal, portable air purification system. Less wealthy individuals might simply carry a small cloth sachet of dried herbs or even just a clove-studded orange. This intense focus on smell leads to a very different approach to what we might call deodorant. The goal wasn't to eliminate body odor with an unscented antiperspirant. Instead, the aim was to overlay your natural scent with a more pleasing one. After bathing, you might rub your skin with a cloth scented with rosewater or an oil infused with herbs. Your clothes, kept in chests with sachets of lavender, would carry a pleasant scent. The idea was not to be scent-free, but to be a source of good, clean smells. It's a mainstream historical fact that the trade in expensive, exotic spices and scents from the East was driven as much by these hygienic and medical beliefs as it was by the desire for flavorful food. But cleanliness had another, even more profound dimension: the state of your soul. We saw how washing was linked to piety. This connection between outer cleanliness and inner purity was a cornerstone of medieval Christian thought. Moral corruption was often described using the language of filth. A sinner was stained, a soul could be unclean, a sinful act left a blot. Confession and penance were a form of spiritual cleansing, a washing of the soul. Conversely, holiness was associated with a miraculous sweet scent. This is the source of the odor of sanctity, a fascinating and widespread belief. It was said that the bodies of exceptionally devout saints did not decay in the normal way after death. Instead, they would emit a beautiful, supernatural fragrance, like roses or lilies. Hagiographies, the biographies of saints, are filled with accounts of this phenomenon. The presence of this scent was taken as divine proof of the person's holiness. It's a powerful testament to how deeply the sense of smell was connected to spiritual health. This creates a paradox. While the Church praised cleanliness as a reflection of a pure soul, it also elevated certain figures who practiced extreme forms of self-denial, which could include the rejection of bathing and grooming. Some ascetic saints famously avoided water for years, viewing any comfort or care for the body as a form of vanity that distracted from the care of the soul. Their resulting stench was seen not as a failure of hygiene, but as a mark of their utter devotion to God and rejection of the worldly flesh. This leads to a debate that historians still find compelling. Was the ideal to be clean for God, or to be dirty for God? For most ordinary people, the answer was clearly the former. The ideal of the unwashed saint was for the spiritual athletes, the superstars of asceticism, not for the everyday believer who just wanted to be presentable in church and healthy in their home. One last quirky detail of this fragrant world is the use of sugar. While we think of it as a sweetener, in the medieval period, expensive sugar was also considered a hot and dry spice in the humoral system. It was used in medicines, and as sugar plates, a small disc of hardened, scented sugar, could be eaten to sweeten the breath. It was an early form of breath mint, a tiny luxury that combined medicine, grooming, and a display of wealth. As true darkness falls and you prepare for bed, you reverse the morning's ritual. You might have a final wash of your hands and face with the basin and ewer. You comb your hair one last time. You check that the fire is banked and the door is bolted. You climb into your bed, the scent of lavender from the linen and wood smoke from the hearth mingling in the cool air. You are safe inside your home, a small bubble of relative cleanliness and order. You have navigated a world that is, by our standards, filled with filth and hazard, but you have done so with a clear set of principles. You have fought a daily battle against dirt and decay with water, brooms and herbs. You have understood the world through its smells, seeking out the sweet and warding off the foul. And you have tied your physical well-being to the state of your soul. The medieval understanding of hygiene was a holistic one, a complex tapestry woven from threads of practicality, social custom, medical theory, and deep spiritual belief. And as you pull the wool blanket up to your chin, you can rest, feeling clean in body, and perhaps a little cleaner in spirit too. Board games in ancient Egypt. Settle back, find a comfortable position, and allow your breathing to slow. We are going to let our thoughts drift on the warm, dry air, back to a time and a place ruled by the sun and the steady, life-giving rhythm of the Nile. Leave the busy noise of your world behind. We are traveling to ancient Egypt, not to see the great pyramids being built, nor to witness a pharaoh's procession, but to find a moment of quiet leisure at the end of a long day. Imagine the day is drawing to a close. The relentless heat has finally broken, and a gentle breeze whispers through the reeds along the riverbank. The sky is turning a soft, dusty rose. You are sitting on a low stool in the open courtyard of your simple mud brick home. The smell of baking bread and the faint, sweet scent of lotus blossoms on the water hangs in the air. The work is done. The accounts have been scribbled, the pottery has been shaped, or the fields have been tended. This is a time for rest, for family, for quiet companionship. Your neighbour, a friend you have known for years, catches your eye and gives a slow nod. Without a word, he fetches it from a small alcove in the wall. The game. It is a long rectangular box, beautifully made of acacia wood, polished smooth by 1,000 games. It's heavy and solid in your hands. This is the game of senet. The word itself means passing or passage, and at its heart, that's what it is. A race. A game of moving all your pieces across a grid of squares and hopefully off the other side before your opponent does. But as you set it up, you know it's so much more than that. It is by far the most beloved pastime in all the land of Egypt. And when I say all the land, I mean it. This isn't just a game for scribes and craftsmen relaxing in the evening. It's a mainstream historical fact that senet was played by absolutely everyone. In the opulent palaces of Thebes, the pharaoh himself would play, perhaps on a board of gleaming ebony inlaid with ivory and brilliant blue faience. We know this because we have found these magnificent sets in their tombs. In her own lavishly decorated tomb, the great Queen Nefertari is painted in a moment of serene focus, one hand gracefully extended over a Senate board, her opponent unseen. Soldiers on campaign would play, scratching a rough grid onto a rock or a spare piece of wood to while away the hours between patrols. Even the labourers who built the great temples and tombs played. A particularly charming fringe tidbit of archaeology is the discovery of Senate boards scratched casually onto loose roofing slabs in temples. You can almost picture two workers sitting high above the ground during their midday break, sharing a bit of bread and beer while trying to best each other before the foreman calls them back to work. You place the game between you and your friend. The board is a grid of 30 squares arranged in 3 neat rows of 10. You each have a set of playing pieces, usually 5, though sometimes more. Yours might be simple conical pieces of blue faience, a type of glassy ceramic, while your opponent's are white. They feel cool and smooth to the touch. There are no 6-sided dice here. Your moves are determined by something simpler. You take 4 small flat sticks, each with a dark side and a light side. You will toss them, and the number of light sides showing will determine how many squares you can move a piece. It's a game of chance, but also of simple strategy. Which piece do you move? Do you try to race ahead, or do you land on your opponent's piece, sending it back to the start in a moment of deep personal satisfaction? The game is friendly, of course, but not so friendly that you don't enjoy your friend's groan of frustration. It seems some aspects of game night are universal. You toss the casting sticks. The gentle clatter they make on the packed earth is a familiar, comforting sound. 2 white sides up. You move your first piece 2 squares forward. Your opponent takes his turn, and his luck seems divinely inspired, shall we say. He gets a perfect throw and lands on a key square. You narrow your eyes playfully. The quiet of the evening is now filled with the light sounds of the game, the click of the sticks, the soft slide of the pieces on the wood, the occasional sigh or triumphant chuckle. This scene, this simple act of playing a board game, is one of the most common motifs in Egyptian art. For a society so focused on monumentality and the afterlife, it's a beautifully humanizing glimpse into their daily lives. They show us that after a day of worshipping gods and building for eternity, the ancient Egyptians loved to just hang out and play a game. It was their equivalent of a streaming binge or getting utterly trounced by a child in a video game that you just don't understand. But even here, in this casual game, there's a whisper of something deeper. A few of the 30 squares on the board are not blank. They are marked with hieroglyphs, symbols of good or bad fortune. You try to land on the good ones and avoid the bad. Your friend naturally seems to have an uncanny ability to do just that. As your pieces move across the board, marching in a zigzag pattern towards the final squares, the name of the game, passing, starts to feel a little more resonant. You are passing your opponent's pieces, passing time, passing from one side of the board to the other, and it's this metaphorical weight that slowly, over centuries, began to transform Senet from a simple leisure activity into something else entirely. Egyptologists still debate to the exact moment when Senet transitioned from a simple pastime to a profound religious symbol, but the connection was undeniably there. The game you hold in your hands, the one you are playing on a warm evening in your courtyard, has another purpose. It is practice. The board is not just a playing field, it's a mirror of a much greater journey that every soul would one day have to take. But for now, you don't dwell on that. You are focused on the here and now. The game, The sun has dipped below the horizon, and someone has lit a small oil lamp, its light casting long, dancing shadows. You are simply passing the time, enjoying a moment of peace, locked in a timeless, friendly battle of luck and wits. The game continues, the small pool of lamplight creating an intimate world for just you, your friend, and the 30 squares of the Senate board. Let's lean in closer and trace the path your pieces must take. This is a journey that hundreds of generations of Egyptians knew by heart, a familiar landscape of chance and consequence. The board, as we've noted, is 3 rows of 10 squares for a total of 30. This number, 30, was significant. It mirrored the number of days in a typical month of the Egyptian calendar. Your pieces begin on what we would call the top left row and move along it to the right. Then they drop down to the middle row and move back to the left. Finally, they drop again to the bottom row, moving from left to right once more, heading towards the final square and off the board. It's a precise, flowing path, like an ox ploughing a field, or a miniature representation of the journey of the sun god Ra across the sky. The materials of the board itself tell a story of social status. The board you are playing on, made of local acacia wood, is a solid, respectable piece of craftsmanship. Poorer Egyptians, like those workers we pictured on the temple roof, might just scratch the grid into the earth or a spare piece of limestone. The game was the same, the experience just as real. But for the elite, a Senate set was a treasure, a work of art to be admired as much as played. Archaeologists have found breathtaking examples in the tombs of pharaohs and high officials. Tutankhamun, for example, had several exquisite sets buried with him. One is a box made of ebony, its 30 squares inlaid with gleaming ivory. The drawer that holds the pieces has a small silver bolt. Another is made entirely of lustrous carved ivory. These were not just games. They were status symbols, declarations of wealth and taste. Some even featured legs carved like the hind legs of a bull, a symbol of strength and virility, transforming the game box into a piece of fine furniture. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a gilded Monopoly set, but with far more spiritual significance. The game pieces too vary greatly. Your humble faience cones are the standard, but royal sets feature pieces shaped like spools, or small, intricately carved human heads. They were made from precious materials like ivory, alabaster, or jasper. Holding one of these pieces would feel different, heavy, cool, and infused with the power and permanence of the stone. The rules of Senet, however, were never written down in a comprehensive rulebook. This is one of the great puzzles for Egyptologists. It's as if the game was so ubiquitous, so ingrained in the culture, that no one ever thought to explain it. It was like trying to write down the rules for tag. Everyone just knew. Scholars have had to painstakingly reconstruct the gameplay by studying the depictions of people playing, analysing the markings on the boards, and making educated guesses. While the exact rules are still debated, the general flow of the game is fairly clear. It's a race game. Your goal is to get all of your pieces off your side of the board before your opponent does. You roll your 4 casting sticks. The possible outcomes are 1, 2, 3, 4, or a special bonus throw of 5 if all 4 land on the dark side. You must move a piece if you have a legal move. Landing on an opponent's piece sends it back to the square your piece started from, a move of delicious aggression. 2 of your own pieces on the same square could form a blockade, which an opponent could not land on or pass. 3 pieces together were even stronger. It's a simple system of attack and defense, luck and blocking that feels incredibly modern. The real intrigue, however, begins in the final row of squares. The last 5 squares from 26 to 30 are where the game transforms. These are almost always marked with special hieroglyphs, turning this final stretch into a gauntlet of rewards and penalties. Square 26, often marked with a sign for goodness or beauty, Nefer, was a safe haven. Landing here meant you were well positioned for the final exit. Square 27, however, was often the House of Water. Landing on this square was a disaster. Your piece was considered drowned and sent either all the way back to the beginning or to a middle square to start its journey over again. You can just imagine the groans of despair. It's the ultimate go back to start card, and it could snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Squares 28, 29 and 30 are often marked with numbers or symbols representing 3, 2 and 1. It is thought that to bear your pieces off the board, you had to roll the exact number to exit from these squares. For example, if your piece is on square 28, you must roll a 3 to get it off. A roll of 2 would mean you couldn't move that piece. This endgame created incredible tension and required a lot of luck. It's the source of a fringe belief that some sets might have included a form of loaded casting sticks, subtly weighted to improve a player's chances. Though no definitive evidence for this has ever been found, it's a tantalizing thought. The idea of a cheating pharaoh is just too good to dismiss entirely. Historians still argue whether a player had to get all their pieces across the water square and into the final 5 before they could start bearing them off, which would have made the game even more challenging. Regardless of the specifics, it's clear these last squares represented a dangerous and pivotal transition. As your pieces entered this zone, the casual game of leisure began to feel weightier, more consequential. You are no longer just passing your opponent, you are trying to pass a series of divinely ordained tests. You watch as your friend's piece lands squarely on the House of Water. You offer a small, sympathetic wince, which does a poor job of hiding your glee. His piece is swept back across the board. The tide of the game has turned. The board, which a moment ago seemed like a simple racetrack, now feels like a landscape of hope and peril. The polished wood beneath your fingers seems to hold the memory of all the triumphs and misfortunes of games past, a silent witness to the endless, beautiful, and frustrating journey of passing through the 30 squares. The lamp flickers, and your game of Senet is reaching its tense final moments. But let's pause for a moment and lift our gaze from the familiar grid of 30 squares. Senet, for all its immense popularity, was not the only game played under the warm Egyptian sun. The desire for diversion is a varied one, and the ancient Egyptians had a charmingly diverse collection of games to fill their leisure hours, each with its own unique character and mystery. Let's imagine you set aside the Senet board for another night. Tucked away in the same storage chest is a different kind of game board, one with a more peculiar, almost hypnotic design. You lay it out. Instead of a neat grid, the board is circular, and carved into its surface is a continuous coiling spiral. This is the game of Mehen. The name Mehen means the coiled one, and it was also the name of a protective serpent god who was said to wrap himself around the sun god Ra during his nightly journey through the underworld, shielding him from the monster Apep. The board itself is a representation of this divine serpent. The spiral path is divided into dozens of small segments, like the scales of a snake, leading from the outer edge to the center, where the serpent's head rests. Found from Egypt's earliest periods, Mehen is far more ancient than Senet, and also far more mysterious. We know what the board looks like, and we've found the playing pieces that went with it. Small, spherical marbles, often in sets of 6, and most distinctively beautiful little figurines of lions or occasionally dogs. This is where the real puzzle begins. Despite having the board and the pieces, no one is entirely sure how Mehen was played. There are no paintings of people playing it. There are no texts that describe the rules. It's a game that has been lost to time. This complete lack of information has made Mehen a fascinating subject for speculation. Egyptologists, like detectives with only a few tantalizing clues, have tried to reconstruct it. The mainstream historical fact is that it was almost certainly a race game, with players moving their marbles along the serpent's back towards the center. The lion pieces, it's theorized, may have acted as aggressors, eating the marbles or blocking their path. Perhaps it was a game for more than 2 players, each with their own set of marbles. Or maybe it was cooperative. Was there an element of chance, like the casting sticks of Senet? Or was it purely a game of strategy? We simply do not know. It's a silent, enigmatic relic, its rules as coiled and cryptic as the serpent it represents. Playing it would have felt fundamentally different from Senet. Not a zigzag path, but a spiral journey inward, into the heart of the sacred serpent. Now let's look at another game, one that feels much more familiar and brisk. It's known to modern scholars as hounds and jackals, a wonderfully descriptive name, though the Egyptians likely called it something else. The board for this game is small and elegant, often shaped like a portable piece of furniture. It's a rectangular box with a rounded end standing on 4 slender animal legs. On its top surface is a track of 58 small holes, and arching over the center is a beautifully carved palm tree, its fronds symbolizing life and rebirth. The playing pieces are where the game gets its name. You would have a set of 5 small slender pegs with carved heads. One set is topped with the sharp, pointed ears of hounds. The other set features the drooping ears of jackals. They are utterly charming, like tiny pieces of sculpture. Your goal is to race your 5 pegs up one side of the board, around the palm tree and back down the other, moving them according to rolls of casting sticks or knuckle bones. Landing in certain marked holes could grant you an extra turn or force you to miss one. It's a quick, light-hearted race. You can almost hear the excited chatter as a hound overtakes a jackal near the final hole. A particularly quirky tidbit is that while hounds and jackals boards are found in Egypt, similar boards have been found all over the ancient Near East, from Mesopotamia to Anatolia, making it a true international hit of the Bronze Age. It was the Catan of its time, a game that crossed borders and cultures. Perhaps it was carried by merchants and diplomats, a simple way to break the ice and build relationships over a shared, friendly competition. Remember those tales of traders and their fancy imported goods, like the special urine for whitening teeth? Maybe they also brought back the latest board game craze from their travels. Historians still argue whether these games had fixed, universal rules or if, like many folk games today, they had countless house rules that varied from town to town, or even family to family. It's easy to imagine a grandfather teaching his grandchild a version of hounds and jackals, with a unique rule that made the game special to them. Beyond these more complex board games, the Egyptians had simpler pastimes. We see depictions of them playing a game very similar to drafts or checkers on boards with grids of various sizes. And of course, there were dice. Or rather, knuckle bones, the clear cleaned and polished ankle bones of sheep or goats. When tossed, these four-sided irregular bones would land in one of four distinct ways, providing a random number for games of chance. They were the original four-sided die, used for gaming and for divination for millennia. So, as you sit there, the single oil lamp illuminating your face, you are part of a rich and ancient tradition of play. The game in front of you might be the serious, spiritual race of Senet, or it could be the mysterious spiral of Mehen, a game whose secrets you and your friends alone understand. Or perhaps it's the fast-paced chase of hounds and jackals, a game that connects you to people in faraway lands you'll never see. Each one offers a different kind of escape, a different sort of challenge. They are a testament to the universal human need to structure our leisure, to compete, to strategize, and to connect with others over a shared, beautiful object. Section 4. The night has grown deep and still. The game, whether Senet or hounds and jackals, is finished. A winner has been decided, and the pieces are carefully placed back into their wooden box. The momentary thrill of victory and the small sting of defeat fade away, replaced by the quiet calm of the Egyptian night. It is in this stillness that the true, profound nature of these games begins to surface. For an ancient Egyptian, a game was never just a game. It was a rehearsal. Let's return to Senet, the great game of passing. As we saw, the final 5 squares represented a series of trials: goodness, water, and the final 3 hurdles to escape the board. This structure was no accident. It was a direct mirror of what you believed your soul, your bar, would face after death. According to your beliefs, when you die, your soul embarks on a perilous journey through the underworld, the Duat. This is a strange and dangerous realm, filled with fiery lakes, gates guarded by fearsome demons, and a host of challenges that must be overcome to reach the final judgment and, with any luck, the eternal paradise of the Field of Reeds. To help navigate this journey, the wealthy were buried with a collection of magic spells and prayers known as the Book of the Dead. This was your spiritual guidebook, your divine cheat sheet for the afterlife. Over time, the Senet board became a condensed, playable version of this journey. The game wasn't just a metaphor for the afterlife. It became an active tool for engaging with it. Playing Senet was a way to practice and understand the path your soul would take. The race across the 30 squares became the race through the Duat. The opponent across the table was not just your friend, but a stand-in for the forces of chaos and darkness that would try to hinder your soul's progress. Landing on the House of Water was not just bad luck. It was a small-scale experience of the dangers of being cast into a lake of fire. Successfully navigating your pieces off the board was a symbolic victory, a successful passing into the afterlife. This is why we find so many pristine Senet boards in tombs, placed there for the deceased. A famous mainstream historical fact is that Chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead can be interpreted as a description of a game of Senet against an unseen opponent, tying the game directly to the essential funerary texts. The game board was a piece of essential afterlife equipment, as important as the magical amulets and the jars containing your preserved organs. It was believed that your bar, your soul aspect depicted as a human-headed bird, could return to the tomb and play a game on the board you left for it. By playing, your soul could reaffirm its victory over death time and time again. The tomb paintings of people playing Senet take on a new meaning. Queen Nefertari is not just enjoying a moment of leisure in her tomb. She is depicted as a soul, alone, playing against an unseen metaphysical opponent. She is serene and confident, demonstrating her mastery of the game and by extension her mastery over the perils of the afterlife. Her victory on the Senate board ensures her victory in the underworld. The game has become a potent magical act. Historians still argue just how literally the average Egyptian held these beliefs. Was it a deeply felt religious practice for everyone? Or was it a spiritual element that attached itself more formally to the game in elite funerary contexts? For the worker scratching a board on a loose stone, it was likely just a fun way to pass the time, but the symbolism was so pervasive that it surely coloured even the most casual game. Every time you played, you were echoing the most important journey of your existence. And what about our other games? Mehen, the coiled serpent, also had a powerful connection to the afterlife. The god Mehen, as we noted, protected Ra on his journey. By playing the game, by tracing the path of the serpent, were you symbolically placing yourself under his protection? Was moving your pieces to the serpent's head at the center a way of unifying with this divine guardian? Without the rules, it's hard to say, but the potent symbolism is undeniable. Even the light-hearted hounds and jackals with its racing pegs had a spiritual undertone. The jackal was a symbol of Anubis, the great god who guided the dead and presided over the weighing of the heart ceremony. The palm tree at the center of the board was a powerful symbol of rebirth. So even this fast-paced international game hit was grounded in the core concepts of Egyptian belief, judgment and resurrection. The race between the hounds and jackals was a playful echo of the soul's rush towards eternal life. A particularly curious, fringe detail in some high-status Senate boards is that the underside of the box is often marked with a different game board, usually for hounds and jackals. It's a 2-in-1 games compendium. This suggests a fascinating duality. One side for the serious spiritual game of Senate, linked to your eternal fate. Flip it over, and you have a lighter, faster game for more earthly moments of fun. It was a recognition that life contained both profound spiritual concerns and the simple need for a bit of fun. You could prepare for your journey through the underworld and then, with a simple flip of the board, try to beat your cousin in a quick race with some dog-headed pegs. As you pack away the board in the darkness of your home, you feel the weight of this tradition. This simple wooden box is a vessel of immense meaning. It is a connection to your friends and family in this life. It is a tool to contemplate the mysteries of the next. And it is a guarantee that even when your time in the sun by the Nile is over, your soul will still have a way to play, to strive, and to pass into eternity. The game boards found in tombs are not sad relics of a life cut short. They are messages of hope. They are a declaration that life, in some form, with its challenges and its small victories, will continue. And with that peaceful thought, as the stars glitter with breathtaking clarity in the desert sky, it is time for you too to rest. The game is over for tonight.